Hi, this is Chris Stein from Healthcare Christian Fellowship International. Today, I'm interviewing a friend of mine from Switzerland, Dr. Robert Sterren. And we know one another for quite a number of years. We've been struggling a lot with questions about the relationship between faith and healthcare, medicine. We did series of seminars and studies about these topics, biblical view of man and so on. But today I'm going to ask Robert to first introduce himself and then share with us, to begin with, on his personal faith. How did that get going and what happened in his life that made him interested to become a follower of Jesus Christ? So, Robert, over to you.
Hello, Chris. It's so wonderful seeing you again, and it is really a long path we went together. In a while, a little distance, and then again close. Yes, it's a privilege to speak about these issues. I am a pediatric surgeon. In a way, in the last years, I'm over 60. Although the last years is very relative because the years go on and they can go much longer than one thinks wherever. I'm married to Nicole, a wonderful wife. She is now also in the medical field as a general practitioner. We have 4 children between 17 and 21 years, and I'm in a Reformed church, very alive church, where education is an important part of their calling. So when I struggle with these issues, I see there's some answers, but also got answers from other places too. So if I get into this issue of why and how did I become a believer, there's one part, a simple answer, just say from God the Father by his Son Jesus Christ through his Holy Spirit, because out of myself, if I look back, that would be impossible. But of course, there's also a more complex answer to it. It has been actually my brother who started to speak about Christ in my life. He became a Christian in 1983. And he started to give me words out of scripture. We had discussions together. He sent to me cassettes. Today's we would call them audio files, where he spoke on it and he preached to me through the cassettes. And I listened to these cassettes as we would listen today to audio files. And he brought me also in contact with churches where I met other Christians. And there, more and more, somehow in a, I think, naive way, I realized that it is something important. So that at one point I felt, well, I just want to somehow express to God that I want to follow him. So I took the Lord's Supper in the kitchen for myself in a small apartment. So that was somehow, for me, a practical way how to become a Christian. I went through quite a crisis after that, and got quite ill in sort of a psychological way. And after going through this, I was very empty and sort of down on a certain reality floor, where actually it was my brother again who prompted me to start to read the Bible regularly. And what I did since then every morning, and that has been such an important foundation in my life. I followed a Bible plan which leads one along through the Old and New Testament. Of course, later on, when I had less time, I did the same thing, but I made the same in 2 years. but that has been most important part of my life since then. And praying regularly after each time of Bible reading has been very important to me too. Like I can give you an example today. I went again through the passage in Isaiah with Hizkiah, and he, being confronted with his death, God gave him another 15 years, and he held the sun for 10 lines. I don't know how many minutes or hours that is exactly, but to hold the sun that it doesn't move, either it's something stupid, or then we can say he has all in his hand. He has heaven and earth in his hand. That opened my eyes again, knew today what a big God we have, who made heaven and earth and can even stop the clock of the sun for a short while for his king. So meeting Christians has been important, becoming a Christian and reading the Bible regularly and praying regularly, and then also putting that into the daily life.
Thank you, Robert. Tell me, can you give some examples of how Jesus made a difference in your life?
Well, it's like in my life, my father was actually more free. I think I didn't have much education. I didn't have any education as a Christian education. It was for me something totally new. So it was from one day into another something totally new. It gave me an aha. I know where everything comes from now. I know why we live, where we go to. So that was the big picture. But then came the small picture, your daily life, where you're confronted with yourself. I give an example. For instance, with Elisha, my youngest son, I had quite struggles with him because he is so stubborn, until my wife told me, look, you are both so similar. And I was sort of totally out of it. I had to see that I have to have so much still now to learn. So it's a learning process to become more and more like Christ, loving, patience. And those are by practical listening, listening what your wife says, searching God. How could I put that into practice? Or in my daily life, when I've in the day clinic, speaking with a patient with a child, and he had a fracture of the radius, then I would go through all the aspects of the operation, and then after I will see him for quite a few weeks, and then at the end I ask him where is he going to, what profession he wants to go into, and then we can have some open talk, and there we can also talk sometimes about aspects of hope, aspects of following Christ, sometimes very rarely. So it's a character we have to work on, as well as finding ways how to bring along others also onto that path.
Thank you for sharing, Robert. Yeah, that character part is the one that keeps us humble, isn't it?
Yeah.
And now, I love stories. So tell me about, you just mentioned Nicole. How did the two of you get together, and what role did faith play in your relationship?
Well, faith, for me, it was always clear that my wife would have to be someone who follows Christ too. So there was a good saying I heard once: you would have problems with your stepfather, which means not the enemy of God, when you would have a wife who would not follow Christ. So that was for me one important aspect of it. Now, if you ask how that worked, it could be a huge story, or it could be a small story. We met in a Christian medical association meeting in England for the first time, but that was about, I think, 8-9 years before we started to meet each other more regularly. And then I met her later on in the Swiss Christian Medical Fellowship meeting. Actually, a friend of mine also made a feast where there were two others who could meet with me too, and so I started to think that she could be someone, and she invited me to the 30th birthday of her, which was on her side the last thing she would do actively, and then I would have to promote or do the things. So I thought I would go there and see how that looks like, how her friends are, and how her parents. So I thought I would be the spectator looking. Later on, I found out that actually they were looking how I was. So it was the other way around. And so there we started to meet more regularly. And after a few weeks, months, we knew that it's our way to go. So 3/4 of a year later, we married and we went that way.
Okay, great. Well, Robert, one of the things I know about you is you like to think about things and you like things to be well organized. And you know, I meet many medical students who are really struggling to get themselves organized. So I thought, now, Robert is just the guy who can give us some practical advice for medical students, especially. How do you get yourself organized, and how do you stay organized? Well, what can you help us in that area, please?
Okay. Well, I like very much to talk about that. You know, it might be something I do or like doing because it's also a struggle for me. So it's not that I can say I'm a hero in that. Mm-hmm. I feel sometimes there are others who are constantly organized, although when you start to dig into the deep, you also see their situations where it doesn't fit. So as it has been a struggle for me to bring the things together, it was becoming an issue again and again to get and stay organized. So the simple first point is, again, to bring all things before God first. You can plan anything without God, and it will go astray, while perhaps not immediately, but after a while, you will see you will be on a total different way. Or you will plan everything and it goes totally another direction you didn't think of. So it is so important to start off again and get to bring the issue you want to plan before God. So that's for me the very first point. And then I found the issue of every year to look back and to look forward as a very important aspect. There was in history a time people have done that, and I've taken this up, and it was very helpful in my life as well as in our life of our marriage with my wife. So it's really worthwhile to take a time regularly, once a year, to think about what actually God has done in your life in the last year. And I like doing this before or after New Year. And now my wife and I go through the calendar and look and list the things we did, and then we take a time of prayer, really thanking God for all that. And then as the next, to look forward, what could be coming in this year. There was a time where I did that first alone, and then, as I told you, with my wife, and the list got longer and longer what we wanted to do. There came a point where there was a big list, but there was a huge gap between what was listed down, what we wanted to do, and what I was doing actively. So I was somehow, it came even a time where I didn't plan much anymore. And a few years ago, so in that sense, to put that to the end, was that I drowned with these many goals. I somehow got lost. And what was a help for me was this teaching. Perhaps you can find this in the internet, Your Best Year Ever. It helped me to nail down again how to deal with goals, with aims, with projects, in a sense. And an important point was not to have more than 10 yearly goals, and to have them over the year, not to do everything in the beginning, to do it divided on the year. And that would mean projects, 10 bigger things in all your life. So not only in your in your profession or studies in this at the university, but also spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, marital, friends, family, but not more than altogether 10 lives. So I would have 2 or 3 goals in my hospital area, like, for instance, I'm thinking to get into, although I'm at the end of my career, still I'm thinking to get into laparoscopic surgery. I never learned that, actually, so I'm trying to find ways. I don't know where I will end, but the next practical thing will be to go into the room in our hospital where we can learn that. So that would be like one aspect. But the aspect in the area with my wife is we'll go on a weekend together, and we'll go over a big hanging bridge. That was her wish. So I have to find, I don't know where this bridge in Switzerland yet is. We're now in the Corona time, so what would that mean exactly? I don't know. So I still have to find this bridge. But my next step is I would ask those who know these areas well where these bridges are. So besides, you heard already, besides this 10 projects, it's very important when you start one project to enter this project with a next concrete step, like asking the people, where could these bridges be, or go into that room. And I hesitated more and more. In the past, I thought you have to plan through every aspect until you get to the end. And that was, I was then confused and couldn't find actually the way. So to plan on these 8 to 10 projects, what is the next step? So that's how to organize things. That's the big scale of project. Where you can stay organized is to review these goals. As you would have 3 projects in the first 3 months, every day think what would be 1 or 2 things you want to continue with this goal, and weekly to see how did that work, and quarterly somehow to review this goal. That's in this teaching very helpful. And then also, as often, to have accountability, to share it with a good friend, to say what could one go there. Now, as you see, somehow, sometimes we think we have to organize something better. For instance, the plan your exams. How can I plan my exams? So I had to, that's something I learned very, very early already, is you have to plan your planning time. or else I will never plan my exams. You think one has to plan the exams, but you have to plan first when you want to plan the exam. And if I take this as example, the exams, there I myself did it in that way. I put down on the floor every material I have to learn on for the exams. I knew what the whole list was, either the material physically or list down what are all areas the exams will be. And then I'll plan when will I learn for them. So from the end until up to now. And then when I've got that, I can start. That's now a very concrete planning. That's a smart, that would be now a little different as a project. You don't exactly know where to go. It's like a planning of a concrete situation. And that helped me already, that I knew now it is planned. I don't have to worry because it's in the calendar now. And there are other things. For instance, when you're in the practice in the surgical area as a student, I found it very helpful. And I myself, as a surgeon, I also like actually those students who prepare themselves for the operation. That the day before, they look in the anatomy book, they look the operation up in the internet and YouTube. There are so many ways how, and then they prepare themselves for the operation. And yes, there are many other things too. I would, to summarize this part, there would be so many things. I'm putting up a homepage in German, actually. It'll be onerobertstern.ch, where we'll have some practical aspects for medical students in blogs, where we'll be going much more into these issues. So if I would summarize, one has to stay concrete for the next step. Plan your planning time, review it, and then never forget to look back and thank God for all what He has done already.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. I know that medical students, 30% of them, in one article I read, also suffer from some form of depression because of struggling to cope with the pressures that are on them in the studies. And so from what you've said, if you plan, it already removes some pressure because you know that you're systematically going to work on something. You mentioned prayer and the daily Bible reading as part of strengthening yourself inwardly. That really, for sure, I agree with you, helps your coping abilities are strengthened because you have a source of help from outside you. You don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Now, some students still struggling in the area of ethical issues that they are having to face. Sometimes they have colleagues or the head of the department that gives them a hard time. What can they do about coping with all these outward stress factors that are coming towards them? You have some ideas, helpful ideas for them?
Yeah, well, there are many things one can take as help. So one aspect I would say, because very often one can also struggle or have sort of depressive thoughts or ideas when you're tired. Mm-hmm. So I would always suggest, even in the most intense time, like exams, to have one day off in the week is so important. To have your Sabbath day. It could be if you work. If I am duty on Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. So I'll try to make that the next week, Saturday and Sunday. It's not always easy. So, or I make it on the Thursday, half a day, and another half a day. But as a student, even more, I would really suggest to have one day off in the most intense time, because we are made for working 6 days and 1 day off, and every other way has some influences nevertheless. So that would be one aspect. The other aspect of ethical issues, dealing when others confront you, I think there's a huge area for us as Christians and medical people to learn to communicate. How do we communicate with people? There's this issue of how do I build up space when I'm pressed to a wall, in a sense. And there are some very easy, helpful aspects there, like when someone says to you, do you believe in God? Or isn't that something crazy? That's a very, I don't know how often that will be, but then you could start and build up like facts. Well, everyone believes, some believe in God, some believe in state, some believe in us. So you build up like facts, and then you can interpret them. Believing in God can be eternally helpful. Believing in the state can sometimes not always be helpful, but it makes sense. Sometimes you need protection. It makes sense. You give interpretation. What do you believe? Then you give the ball back to the chief. So that gives you like a space when you sort of press to the wall. That's one aspect of communicating. It's so important that we learn to communicate in the situation, and that we get close to the person, that we don't get into our ideas, but see where are they in their heart. That needs so much wisdom.
Oh, thank you, Robert. I think that's very practical and illustrates the fact that God's kingdom is relational, right? We don't want to just win arguments. We want to build relationships with people.
Yeah.
And sometimes people forget that, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's an area that I didn't understand well when I was younger. I love to argue. And so I think in my argumentative state, I chased many people away from God rather than build relationships with them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we might be very similar in that area. I was doing that too, and I heard. Well, I had to learn, and even now I learned that from a chief. In the hospital, who's actually has a Christian background. I don't know how close he's now at the moment. He can be so difficult because he's just quiet sometimes. To be sometimes more on the listening side than on the speaking side can be so helpful in so many places.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert, for sharing some very helpful thoughts with us about getting organized. Yes, you mentioned best year ever, right?
Yes.
From who wrote this stuff again?
Michael Hyatt.
Okay, so if people Google that, they can find it. I used these materials also for a while, and I must say I found it very helpful to bring focus in my life. And I think it's impossible to get organized if you don't have focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I love the way that you also say, don't think to plan the whole thing out before, because it's real life doesn't work like that.
No.
What's the next step? What's the next step? I think that's very, very helpful. Thank you so much. and looking forward to have some more interviews with you.
Yeah.